I started focusing a lot on core strength, a lot on strengthening my shoulders, because I'm not going to my hands when I'm falling. I'm now taking that hit, across my body, across the side, or across my back. Falling with style, right? But also making sure that I'm like kind of building my own bit of muscular armor.
Welcome to the Art of Prevention. Today, we are in a very special location with a very special guest. We are in the Adaptive Action Sports office at Copper Mountain with one of the Paralympic athletes that represented the United States in Beijing and has had multiple experiences and medaled and gotten gold and won world championships in the past. He's dealt with a couple of injuries, a couple of obstacles, and he's here to talk about all of those experiences today. Zach Miller, what's going on? Tell us about yourself. Tell us about how you got your start into snowboarding, because I think that's unique and really interesting, and all of the progression to all of your success. And then let's talk about some of those obstacles that you faced.
Yeah, absolutely. For a brief overview, I actually got involved with snowboarding through my hospital sports program.
Yeah.
So when I was 5 months old, my grandmother came out and she noticed I wasn't hitting some of my baby milestones. And so they took me into an optometrist first to check my vision, and he noticed that I just wasn't tracking things properly. So he sent me to Children's Hospital, Colorado, down in Denver. And so there I received my diagnosis at 6 months old that I had left hemiplegic cerebral palsy. And so from right then on, I was in and out of the hospital, sometimes a couple times a week. Sometimes I would go a week without treatment, but it was very regular, and it was just to make sure that I grew properly. And as I started to grow up and started to get more involved with sports kind of through like middle school, then my doctors started to notice I had a bit of a competitive spirit, if you will. And so they recommended that my mom enter me in their hospital sports program. Because, she had already had me doing a lot of different things. She had me in both sports that my school offered. She was trying to do as many kind of extracurricular activities with me as possible because she noticed that I was competitive. I have an older brother that I grew up with. His name is Josh, and he was very athletic as well. And so he kind of gave me a target to chase after. And so then when I started to get older, I was around 8 years old, they had me get on a bus that met right off of I-70, and I got on there with a bunch of the other patients at Children's Hospital, some nurses and doctors that had gotten instructor certifications, and you would get paired with one of them. They would drive you up there to Winter Park and would give you, some rental skis for the day and go teach you how to ski. And so I had done some of the other events that they had. Sometimes, they were doing fishing or football or soccer and just kind of teaching the kids the basics of these sports and seeing if there was any interest. But when I got back from that day of skiing, I jumped into the back seat, and my mom asked me how it went as she started the car, and I didn't answer. And when she looked in the back seat, I had already passed out. Like, I was just done for the day. And so we finally get back home. She wakes me up to get me out of the car, and I can't shut up about how much fun I just had, out on the snow skiing for the first time.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't wait to go back. And that's when my mom,
not a bad pass.
Yeah, absolutely, a good pass out. I was just exhausted from a day of just running around, tripping all over my skis. And so, then I did that for another couple years until I was 9. And that's when I discovered snowboarding. I got on the lift there and was headed up and just noticed a pack of snowboarders riding down, and they were having way too much fun, just all laughing with each other and spraying each other in the face and everything. And I turned to my instructor. I was like, I have to try that. And so they got me on a board. 2 years later, I started training with the NSCD, the National Sports Center for the Disabled, that's based there in Winter Park. And they told me, at the time it was 2012, they were like, hey, just so you know, there's this new sport that's kind of up and coming. It's called border cross. It's actually been around for a few years, but in about 2 years, in 2014, they're going to include it in the Paralympics in Sochi. And so if this is something you might be interested in, and I was like, well, can I go fast? And they were like, that's what it's all about. And I was like, sign me up. So then when I was 11, I signed up for my first just local race, and that's when I got hooked. I raced with one other guy. He fell, and I won. And so I was like, this is amazing. I'm the greatest athlete ever. I won my first race. And so I was hooked. I started training full time and watched, three of my teammates and really kind of coaches at that time, the three boys from the U.S. team go and just sweep the podium. And that's when I was like, this is absolutely something I want to do.
Tell us a little about some of the nuances between border cross and some of the other things that we probably more traditionally attribute to snowboard competitions, like big air slope style, stuff like that. What are some of the nuances there?
Yeah, good question. The most common question I get asked is, do you get points for style? And the answer is no. Border cross is strictly racing. It's trying to get from point A to point B as fast as humanly possible. One thing that kind of makes it difficult is the features. And so your traditional border cross course, there's gates. You have 4 gates right next to each other. And once that opens, it leads into a start section. It always varies with every course, but they are kind of slow, yet very technical and difficult features to traverse on a snowboard. So the focus there is just dexterity, it's speed, it's precision. And then once you get out of the start section, you have your first few turns. Sometimes in between there, you'll have jumps or roller sections, so just like big bumps that are nice and smooth, so you can pump them and build speed. And then as you make your way farther down the course, you might hit some bigger jumps. They'll progress in size as well as speed, and then eventually you got your finish line, and it's last one down's a rotten egg, top 2 advance, and you just kind of bracket your way all the way up to the finals.
Yeah, I mean, it almost looks like you're just in kind of a brawl on a sheet of ice, getting down and seeing who can get down there the fastest. Right?
That's the other question: is can you punch the guy next to you? And no, not yet, at least. You're allowed to defend your own space. Oftentimes, if I'm trying to pass someone on the inside and I'm kind of behind them because we're on our heel edge, sometimes I'll just put my hand on their back just to be like, just letting you know I'm here. Don't turn in too aggressively, you'll take us both out. Other times, if I think I already have the pass, I'll just do it clean and not let them know I'm there, try and be a little sneaky. But rubbing is racing, and oftentimes you are going to end up in the same turn going for the same line, and you're going to kind of you're going to hit each other. There will be contact sometimes. It's kind of what makes the sport so interesting. But for the most part, no, it's just, it's usually very close. It's always exciting. Yeah. And it's the reason I always come back to it.
And you've also competed in other disciplines as well, right?
Yeah. So we have 2 main disciplines. We have snowboard cross, and then we have bank slalom. Bank slalom is a little bit more technique heavy. And so it's one person at a time. It's just strictly against the clock. You're not racing on course with anyone else. Usually you get 2 runs and it's your best of 2. And so it's just, it's like a regular slalom course, but we have, embankments kind of built up to help us get a little bit more edge angle on our snowboards. And so it just becomes line choice. It becomes, where do I enter? Where do I exit? How do I navigate this turn and pump it with kind of the most speed? And so that's why oftentimes during summer, we're doing skateboarding, we're dropping into bowls, because there's a lot of transferable skills there.
You're cross training.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Do you do any other like dry land training to complement that as far as strengthening and things like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. One thing, a big hobby of mine that I picked up recently is my motorcycle. I rode it in here today, and honestly, it's one of the things that kind of keeps my mind sharp and always helps reinforce a lot of habits that I like to have when I'm snowboarding. One of the biggest things is your field of vision. Yeah. It's something that we constantly talk about, and it's one of the biggest things that I think for new riders and people who are new to snowboarding struggle with the most. Yeah. Because so much of snowboarding is balance and trying to maintain that between your 2 edges and switching that balance between your toe and heel. A lot of people end up staring at their feet quite often. And it's the same thing, just with driving, even with a regular car. A lot of people will look at whatever's right in front of them, or just the road that's, a few feet in front of their car. And the best thing that you can do is start to lift your vision at what's farther ahead of you and what's more around you. And you definitely have to do that whenever you're on a motorcycle, because there is so much around you now. Yeah. And so that kind of keeps my vision where I want it to be, because now I'm looking all the way through a turn rather than just, kind of what's in front. When you're driving, you can be a little bit more passive. When I'm on my bike, I feel like I'm much more proactive. And so it kind of keeps me in that race mentality. Also, just the same way I go through traffic on my bike is the same way that I have to navigate it on the hill whenever I'm just training at a public mountain. anticipating the movements of drivers and the people in front of you, the skiers and snowboarders that are taking random turns left and right. It's a great way for me to stay focused.
Yeah, when I was going through school, a lot of my mentors would call that the things that you just described, multisensory integration.
Yeah.
So integrating your visual system and your vestibular system with all of the exteroreception, or the reception from all of your skin receptors. Because I mean, I bet you take into account, even subconsciously, all of the things that your inner ear is telling you.
Yeah.
All the visual inputs from other snowboarders, variable conditions, which way the wind is taking you, etc. And that's so interesting. I never really thought about the bike as cross training, but I bet you also keep into that kind of flow state as well.
Absolutely.
That you definitely need when you're board cross and also bank slalom racing, huh?
Yeah. Another super common hobby and cross training opportunities for us is downhill mountain biking. Or even cross country, just because, that helps build endurance and strength. But that's also, there's banks in there, there's jumps, there's different rhythm sections, but also very much so, you are having to maintain that line. You are having to use all of that information on all your different senses all at the same time to make your next move.
Did you do any specific visual training? I know you mentioned visual field, and that was kind of the thing that led to your initial diagnosis of CP, right?
Yes, actually.
So what kind of stuff do you do to train your visual system? Because that's something that really does not get talked about. I mean, people talk about squats and doing stuff like that, but something we also haven't even talked about is visual system training, and that integration is so key and crucial. Tell me what kind of stuff you're doing with that.
Absolutely. Something that I love to do that some people have definitely questioned, and I would love to use this opportunity to talk about it and kind of take away some of the stigma, is video games.
Yeah.
Wow, they can be such a great training tool. I mean, seriously, I've talked to a couple of different doctors about this. I've talked to one of my closest sports psychologists about this as well. Video games, when you're using them properly, obviously it's one thing to like sit on the couch and just be a slob and eat Doritos all day while you play Call of Duty. It's another thing altogether. For me, whenever I'm at home, one of the things that I love to do when I'm feeling competitive, when I want to use some of that energy and get that out of my system, is I'll turn on my PC and I'll play very intense tactical games like Valorant or Rainbow Six or even something like Rocket League. Just because those games will continue to kind of build that connection between my eyes and the rest of my body, and processing information kind of on a dime.
Speeding up reaction times.
Exactly.
Increasing that flow state. So many people are talking about flow states, but something that you can access in the video game and esports setting. Which, if you want to talk about esports too, because I know you're getting into that a little bit as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing that I love about video games is I actually, it's not even just that I feel. I can see the role that video games has played in my life has allowed me to enter that flow state much faster than a lot of my teammates and competitors. Because when I sit down and I just load up a video game, right, I'll still do a warm-up. People don't think you have to warm up for video games. You do. There's a lot of fine motor skills. That's the other reason I like video games, is because with my cerebral palsy, one of the things that is very affected in my physical, my muscular system is my fine motor skills.
Yeah.
And so for me to be able to move a mouse and just the fine movements it requires to make a small flick, with my character, that's something that I constantly have to keep training. And it's something that you can lose so easily. If I play with some friends and then I go on a vacation, like I did, last month, I went on a vacation for a week and a half. I spent some great time with my family. I came back, I picked up the game. I was the worst on my team because I had just lost that upkeep of very fine motor skills that it took for me to play this game competitively with my friends. And so when I sit down and I start these games up, I can very easily start to do a small warm-up that takes maybe 5 minutes of me just tracking different targets, being able to switch between two targets quickly and fire accurate shots. And then I hop into a game and I play. And then it's less mechanical and more tactical and thinking and setting myself up for success. And so then I start using all those different things in the culmination of one game, and I have to do it quickly. And so then I find when I make it out to a World Cup and I'm getting ready to race, I find that a lot of my teammates will spend so much of their morning just trying to visualize, trying to get in the right headspace. They're trying to, refocus all of their energy into racing, and even the smallest things are able to throw them off of their game. If they don't get their coffee at the time that they really want it, or they have to wait a little bit for breakfast. All of these things can kind of start to interfere with their structure that they need for race day. And I almost find that my ability to just like sit down after a long day at work and be able to then play this game with my friends and get into that flow state quickly, I'm able to apply then to my race days, where I can be taking it easy and having fun and don't really need anything to be perfect. And then the second I'm in the gate, I can just turn it on and go.
I love that. Yeah. And I think that's such a crucial component to competing at a high level, because when you head out to those competitions, those World Cups, nothing ever goes to plan, and it's almost like the coolest part of the story, which I bet you've got some really cool stories from when you won the world champs. Did everything go perfect that day?
Absolutely not. No. And that's oftentimes what makes a great athlete is there's one thing to be the best athlete on this day. There's another thing altogether to be the best athlete across an entire season.
Yeah.
It's what makes world championships like, Formula One or MotoGP or something like that so exciting, is because you look back at that season and you look at the drivers and the riders that win. They are not winning every single race. Sometimes they're not even podiuming at every single race. Sometimes they're not even finishing every single race.
Yeah.
And so absolutely, so much of your athletic potential can come down to how you handle even the worst days. Those can be the ones that transform your season, transform your career, make you the athlete that actually defines who you are.
Yeah, so esports helped you create that adjustment capability, we'll call it, for when you kind of have to expect the unexpected, huh?
Yeah, and also when your mental's thrown off, because you can put so much effort into yourself as an athlete physically, spend countless hours in the gym, physical therapy, doing everything, stretching every single day before every race, before every exercise. You can be in perfect physical shape. And if you show up to your competition, your race, whatever it may be, and you just had one of the worst mental days, and you're not feeling it, you're not in a good mood, you have a bad attitude, everything is just gnawing at you, you are not going to perform well. All of those hours that you just spent in the gym, down the drain, wasted. And so you have to focus on that mental fortitude, that mental toughnness. And I do get that definitely from video games, because they can be very frustrating.
Some 9-year-old is like, yeah, dude, you suck.
How many countless videos do you see on the internet of people, smashing their keyboards or throwing a controller through their TV because, something didn't go the way they wanted it to in the match that they had.
Yeah.
And so absolutely, repetitions there can be very helpful for me on a race day when things are not going my way. Terrible conditions. I just had a horrible run. It's the same thing as me just getting absolutely dogged on by a 9-year-old, being able to then turn that around and be able to kind of make that mental reset happen and refocus your energy, so that way you're not making stupid mistakes the next time you go out on course, the next round that you go on your computer. It's the same thing.
Now, for you, do you feel like you almost built up this emotional callus to those things, or are you really good at compartmentalizing? Is it a little bit of both? How do you bounce back from those days when you have things that are going wrong? How do you bounce back and have a really good performance?
That's great. That's a fantastic question, actually. I wouldn't say it's emotional callous. You do have to be careful with that, because if you do start to get calloused and you do start to kind of take away all the emotion that you get out of this passion, you're going to start to lose your passion for it. And
emotional callous versus don't become jaded.
Don't become jaded. And it's so easy for people to do that. How many athletes have I seen go through just this sport, right, that had so much athletic potential, but then because they built up that callousness, because they got jagged, because they let the small things, maybe not get to them on race day, but then take away from how much they liked the sport because of, how difficult it was or how much it sucked, then they turn around and walk away. And it's like, oh man, if you had just found a way to cope with it, to come to terms with it, to just process it in a healthy way. And that's absolutely something that I might get from something like video games, is just, you do kind of have to compartmentalize a little bit. But there's a lot of things that you can do in that moment just to help you, right? The biggest thing is the stress factor. You know, anyone that competes in sports understands exactly what I mean when things are not going your way and you are stressed out and you know you're making stupid mistakes. How do you pull yourself out of that, right? First step I always take is hydration.
Yeah.
I almost guarantee you on any day of the week when I'm out on course, I'm not drinking enough water. I'm not putting enough hydration into my system to just feel good right off the bat. So whatever I'll do, whatever I'm doing at the moment, I'll just stop, take a second, drink some water. Just that sometimes can just be the little refreshing break you need to be like, all right, that sucked, moving on.
Yeah.
The second thing is just to check in with yourself physically. How am I feeling? All right, I'm tight because I'm stressed. Let me just go through a simple stretching routine, help loosen up my body. During that time, I'm also going to reset mentally. Why am I here? That's a big question I'll ask myself, right? And especially when I'm starting to get upset on things that are out of my control, I start to have that tunnel vision, right? And it's once I can take a step back and be like, I'm not here because of visibility. I'm not here because of that one feature. I'm not here because this guy's being a jerk today. I'm here because I love snowboarding, because this is how I want to be spending my time.
Yeah.
Because if I could do anything in this moment right now, it would be this. All right, cool. Am I doing it? Perfect. Just go do it then. Like, that's it. So many times you can get caught up overthinking and just getting into these specific details that don't matter, and being able to just, do some stretching, take a second, drink some water, and think about like, okay, you know what? I'm here. I'm achieving my goals. I'm spending my time the way I want to. How can I just capitalize on these next few moments? That's what I'll move forward with.
Yeah. Now, how did you take some of those things and apply them during your world champ gold medal season and that competition? Because I know you faced some obstacles there. And then let's talk the Olympics.
Yeah. So, you know, going back to the day that I won my first world championship title, it's at a venue that I like. However, it's at a venue that I didn't have that much success at previously. The bank slalom competition I did there before, I think I got a podium, but it also just wasn't the best I could have ridden. And then the border cross, I don't think it even ended up happening because during that time, COVID had just like started to take over the world. And then like 2 days before we were supposed to race, Trump goes on and he's like, hey, we're closing down the borders. So we were like, okay, we got to get home. So then coming back, then it was like, all right, it's going to be different this time around. That was the first thing. It's just like already the reset of like, all right, I've been here before. I'm aware of what happened last time I was here. Has no impact on what's going to happen today. And then going out, and the biggest thing that I remember from that weekend was just the company. I had teammates that had my back, and I had a crew of people supporting me, some coaches and servicemen that were good friends of mine, that were there because they had my best interest at heart. And so because of that, I already just felt safe to compete in that environment. But then once we showed up to the course, it was not the best conditions. The course had actually kind of had like this icy glaze on it because the previous days leading up to it was super cold during the night and super hot during the day. So it would just melt all day and then it would freeze all night. And then you got back up there and it was just
classic
bad.
Spring conditions.
Oh, yeah. And so a lot of athletes were starting to get worried because safety was a bit of a concern. With the way they had built the course, the safety netting, which usually, you know, kind of helps if you end up going a little too high and exiting one of the berms, it'll kind of catch you and let you go. And those nets were actually a sizable distance away from the outside of the berms. And with the way the course was built, you really did have to take a very high line. I actually have a picture on my Instagram of me riding what is really just the finest line between crashing and winning. My toe edge is on the paint, this blue paint that they put around the top of the berm.
For visibility, yeah.
Yeah, and half of my board is sticking out of the turn.
Yeah, you're not supposed to aim for it. They're just supposed to know where it is.
No.
Right?
But I was like literally riding this fine line. I hit, the smallest bump, or I just break a little bit at the waist, and I'm literally shooting out of this berm off of course, right? Potentially getting injured. And so a lot of athletes were worried. And they were worried about the ice. They were worried about the netting. They were worried about the course. They were worried about there was this big hole on the left course that was giving a lot of people trouble. I mean, people were tilted for sure. Mentally, I would not say that that was a great day for most people. And in that moment, I was talking to one of my servicemen, and I was like, everybody seems really scared to go out on course. And he was like, perfect, use it. And I was like, yeah. He's like, these are the days where you can really take a step ahead of the competition by using this in your favor. He's like, if anyone can go out there and ride that super tight, aggressive course in the condition that it's in, the best, it's you. And I was like, all right, perfect. So then I just kind of reframed that as like, oh, sweet. This isn't bad for me. This is bad for you. So I'm going to use that to my advantage.
I love that.
Right? And so then I dropped in knowing, yes, the course is icy. That means it's faster. Yes, there's a little bit of distance between the netting and whatever. I don't even need to worry about that because I'm going to ride this course really well. I know I can. And so I just dropped in and gave it everything. I didn't qualify first that day, but I dropped in, and one of the biggest things, again, is not how good you are in this one moment or on this one day. It's how good can you be on every single day.
Consistency.
It's the average consistency that is so important, that makes great athletes great athletes. And sure enough, as I was making my way through the bracket, the other guy who had qualified first, who was in a really good position to beat me, fell against one of the other competitors in a semifinal. So then I show up to the final, and there's this other guy I'm racing that I have a really good chance against. So then again, you can't get too caught up, can't get too excited. Yes, you have a really good chance, but obviously it's easy to make mistakes on this course. So refocus, recenter, grab some water, talk to my friends, walked over, give myself just a quick stretch, checked in, my hips hurt, my knees hurt, not feeling great, but I have everything I need to go out and win.
Yeah.
And I did.
Yeah. And, some people would say, oh, well, that guy fell. That's like, luck is when opportunity meets preparation. And I love that all the things that we just talked about sound like they really came to fruition.
Absolutely.
So, riding the motorcycle really fast. I mean, the speed limit.
Yeah.
You're going 65, 70 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Hopefully not on I-70, but all of that preparing you for a really fast course.
Yeah, and looking through the turns, anticipating.
Your ability to tap into that flow state probably gave you almost like a safety measure, because you're not worried about these extraneous variables. You're not worried about the course conditions.
Exactly.
You're tapped in. You're flowing. Did you feel like you kind of tapped into that during the World Champs?
I was literally just in that flow state, feeling the rhythm of the course. I had some music going in my ear because whenever I'm on course like alone, not when I'm doing border cross, but definitely when I'm doing bank slalom, I like to listen to music.
Yeah.
And I do find that often helps me find that flow state. And I understand that there are a lot of sports out there that don't allow music whenever you're competing, and that's fine. Using music before you compete, just to get yourself into that good headspace and into that flow, 100% helped me. And so when I saw that picture that I was talking about earlier, I didn't even realize that I was so close on that razor's edge, because I was just, that stuff doesn't occur to you when you're in that flow state. So absolutely, just being able to tap into that 100% helped me that day.
What's your go-to hype song?
Oh man, it depends on how I'm feeling. Oh, I got several playlists. I like EDM and I like dubstep. I would say pretty much anything by Grizz can get me in a really, really good headspace. There's one that he did. It's called Feel It All. That one, for whatever reason, really puts me in a good headspace, because I think just the words "feel it all" kind of act as a mental trigger.
Oh, I love that.
Check in with everything, to feel everything through my body, to feel everything around me, to take all of that information into all my different senses and be able to really ground myself in that moment.
That's super cool. Yeah.
Plus, it sounds cool.
Yeah. We'll have to definitely lead people to your Instagram. Check out that photo for sure. And then maybe do you have Spotify and stuff with your playlists on there?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. We'll have to link that up too.
Yeah.
So then people can get that Zach Miller in the Zone soundtrack.
For sure.
Yeah. You'll have to make us a playlist.
Okay.
So we talked about probably a pretty big highlight right there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about now some of the obstacles that you faced in Beijing, because I think you overcame a lot of those obstacles well. I mean, a lot of those were health issues, and you still went out, gave it your all, and then you're able to reset, get that gold in 2023. Let's just outline where was the start of those obstacles?
Oh man. All right. So all the time when people find out that I'm a Paralympian and I went to China, they always ask me, how was it? And I'm like, man, it was the worst 2 weeks of my life. And people always get so shocked by that. They're like, what do you mean it was the worst 2 weeks? You were living out your dream. And I'm like, yes. Do you understand, though, the stuff that went into those 2 weeks? It was honestly a nightmare for me. It was some of the most difficult 2 weeks, just the most difficult snowboarding I've ever had to do. And I did not have the best results. I went there. I didn't even make top 10 in both categories. I went home completely empty-handed when a lot of people expected me to bring home hardware. It was absolutely just the hardest time I've had in my entire career of snowboarding. Mm-hmm. Yet, some of the most valuable lessons possibly that I could have ever learned, some of the most I learned about my body, and honestly, some of the best moments of like confidence building I've ever had in my career happened there. So I'm actually really thankful for what happened. But so leading up to it, the season was going great. I had just secured my first ever world championship title in Lillehammer, Norway. Things were looking awesome. I had signed a contract with Ralph Lauren. I had a sponsor. I was in the big leagues. I felt like a pro. I felt like an athlete.
You were
everything. Everything was like coming to a summit, right? And I was like, dude, I'm unstoppable. I'm going to go to Beijing. I'm going to bring back a medal. This is going to be great. And at the last World Cup, right before Beijing, we were in Sweden, and I'm dropping into the course. I'm feeling really confident. Things are going really well. Race day comes around. Before a race, like a regular race day, you show up, there's still an inspection at like maybe 9:30, and that lasts for like 30 minutes, and then at 10, training opens. And you usually get maybe like an hour of training. So if you're lucky and your servicemen are prepping your board quick, you can get 2 runs on course by yourself or with a teammate or a competitor, but just for practice. Then time trials start, you run your 2, you get your time, and then heats start. And so it was just training, and I dropped in for my first run. I had just talked to my serviceman, and I was like, I feel great. It's awesome. Today's going to be a good day. Seriously, like I remember being like, today is going to be awesome. And I dropped in, I made it through the start section, and there's this like kind of big roller coming up. And I was like, I'm going to get this roller, like with everything I got. And so I just stood up real aggressive, and immediately this just flash of white and some of the biggest pain I've ever had in my entire, not some of, the most pain I've ever had in my entire life just erupted through my body. And I was like, what just happened?
This wasn't a crash or anything.
No,
this is like
all I did was stand up. And that's why I was so confused for a second. Like I was panicking. I was like, what did I just do? Did someone hit me? Did I just get shot? Like, what happened? My whole body was like almost in shock, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, oh man, that hurt. It still hurts. I don't know but nothing happened. I think I'm fine. I'm just gonna keep snowboarding.
Everything's fine.
Maybe it's just gonna go away. And so the next feature is a jump, and I'm like, gonna hit the jump. And so I hit it, I land, pain erupts through my body again. I'm like, okay, no, something is wrong. Something is very wrong. I'm done. I pull off course and I just fall over, right? I'm on my back and I'm like, what is happening? I didn't hit anything. I have no idea what's going on. And so a guy comes over to ask if I'm okay, and I'm like, no. And I go to pick up my head, and I can't. And so I'm like, I can't reach anything. I had to ask him to unstrap for me. I get on the sled, I go down to the bottom. I'm in so much pain. I couldn't even change out of my gear that night. It took me 40 minutes to go to the bathroom. And then I fly home, I go to the hospital, I get an MRI, and they're like, yeah, so your L4, L5, and S1, just L5 and S1, you've herniated severely. They're gone. All of that nice little juice in there that makes your vertebrae so squishy is, those discs are literally done.
The jelly is out of the donut.
The jelly is out of the donut. He literally told me that. He's like, you have no jelly in those donuts. And I was like, okay, what do I do? And he's like, well, normally we just fuse those. But if we do that, you're not gonna be able to touch your toes. And I was like, okay, well, I need to be able to do that. And he's like, okay, well, we have a couple different options. We can either medicate you, which I don't want to do because that's very temporary, and you have a competition coming up, right? And I was like, yeah, I literally just found out. I got an email the day before when I got home that I had made it. I'd been selected to be a part of the U.S. Paralympic team and go to Beijing, China. And having that amazing thing combined with this terrible experience where I can barely walk to the bathroom now, I'm like panicking. Right? And so I'm like, anything, literally whatever's going to work.
How many weeks out was it?
I'm game. this is 2 weeks out.
Yes. Okay.
This is less than 14 days
Yeah.
until I have to be in Beijing, China, and I'm like crawling, like unable to sit up out of bed. It's bad. And so I was just asking him, I was like, what are our options? And he's like, I don't know, we can't fuse it. We can't medicate you because that's not really going to fix anything. And I was like, okay, just hear me out. Can I make it any worse? And he was like, no. And so I was like, okay, that's honestly, to me at the time, that was great news, right? That was fantastic news. Okay, so I can't make it any worse. So then, correct me if I'm wrong here, but pain is the only thing that's stopping me from snowboarding, right? And he goes, yeah. And I was like, all right, what if like we just did an injection? And he was like, okay. And we thought about it, we spitballed back and forth, and he was like, all right, we're gonna give you an epidural. And I was like, isn't that something you give to like
Pregnant ladies?
pregnant women?
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, 100%. But in your situation, this is gonna work really well. And I was like, okay, so we're gonna do an epidural, and then I can go and compete, and I'm not gonna make anything worse. And he was like, no, I mean, you could. You always could.
Caveat.
Yeah. But ultimately, no, pain is kind of the biggest problem for you right now. So if we can treat the pain, you can compete. I still wouldn't recommend it. And I was like, okay, but it'll work. And he goes, yeah, but it'll work. So we moved forward with it. I got an epidural. I got 16 milligrams of Decadron into both sides of my spine. Normally, for a woman that's in labor, you get 4. And so I got 4 times a dose for a pregnant lady to go and compete and snowboard in China. And so I get the epidural. The procedure goes really well. And I immediately start PT. I start, getting back on my feet, taking things slow, but at the same time, you have the biggest competition of your life coming up. So how do you walk that fine line, right? Because absolutely, even though technically I can't make it worse, I can still re-injure it. It's inflammation that's causing pain. I'm literally now pinching a nerve in my spine. You have to be careful. However, you have to be athletic. So how do you navigate that? And so I just reached out to as many people as I possibly could, and I asked for all the advice that I could possibly get. I took a bunch of notes, and just every single day was baby steps as fast as I could possibly take them, right? And so I made it to China. I'm still in pain. I'm competing, and I'm just doing my best to like nurse myself after every day on snow, right? And I'm making sure that I can kind of get my range of motion in. I can twist my back a little bit. I can start to bend my knees. I can pump a little bit. I can put on the brakes. I can be aggressive. I can hold a tuck. But I still don't need to go full gas yet. And the biggest thing that I'll never forget about those 2 weeks is the training day is coming. It's tomorrow. And I get called by my coaches to come in and talk for a second. And I sit down and they go, listen, we've been thinking. You've qualified for border cross and bank slalom. We have 2 guys here that have qualified for 1 each. We got Evan, who's competing in bank slalom. We got Garrett, who's competing in border cross. Hear us out. You're injured. You're not feeling great. Your back is, sensitive. What if you sit this one out? We give Evan your spot.
The whole competition or?
Border cross,
Okay,
the whole
border cross.
race.
Yeah.
And I kind of sat back and I was like, are you really asking me to like give up this spot that I've worked for 12 years for to have? And they were like, yeah, just think about it. And I was like, oh, I've thought about it. Thought about it for 12 years.
Yeah.
I'm finally in this spot to do what I've always dreamed of doing. I'm racing.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, cool. We get it. Sorry for asking. And I remember being pretty upset about that.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing as an athlete to go through an injury and have to deal with that mental load of I'm not at my best. I want to be at my best. That seems so far away from right now. It's just so difficult to even do those baby steps. You don't want to. You get sick of them after even a few days. Okay, I learned my lesson. I'm injured. I wish I didn't do that. Can I just have my body back, right? There's tons of frustration when dealing with an injury and dealing with the recovery process. But then to add on the fact that my coaches are now kind of doubting my physical ability to compete in this and are asking me to kind of put myself on the sideline. dude, talk about like a low point in your career.
Yeah.
Of like, this is supposed to be your moment.
A couple of days before the biggest race of your life.
And nothing is going your way and your coaches are telling you to stop, right? The people who are supposed to be encouraging you and giving you tips. That was definitely like the hardest day, for sure. The worst day of my whole snowboard career. How do you come back from that within 48 hours and compete at your best?
Yeah.
And so I went to bed that night just like, okay, things are not going my way. There's a lot of stuff that's just out of my control at the moment. And I'm in a lot of pain. This bed doesn't feel great. Just, oh man, I'm not feeling awesome. And I go to training the next day, and as I'm riding, just taking that moment of just centering myself and grounding myself. Looking at just everything around me, the fact that I'm in China, the Great Wall of China is right over there.
Yeah.
I'm at the top of this course. There's this amazing banner that says Paralympics 2022 Beijing. I mean, I'm here.
Yeah.
Just the fact that I'm here already is a bit of a miracle in its own. And I get there and I pull up and I give my snowboard to my serviceman, and he sees me smiling and he's like, "What are you smiling about?" And I was like, honestly, I'm forcing it a little bit, but I'm just smiling because like I'm here. And he just like took a second, he put my board down and he goes, "Do you know how much you like went through to get here?" And I was like, "Yeah, I went through a lot." And he goes, No. Like just in the last 2 weeks, you realize how amazing it is that you're standing by yourself, unaided.
Standing at all.
Yeah. Getting ready to drop into this course. I mean, he saw me that day that I hurt my back. And he's like, to see you bounce back like this is amazing. And in that moment, I did kind of realize that like, I feel like a lot of times as athletes, we are absolutely our biggest critic. We do not give ourselves any slack because we want to be better. Always. We want to be better, stronger, faster, right? And some of the times, you know, all you see is just not achieving those things rather than taking a step back and seeing all the things that you have achieved to get to where you are in the first place. I mean, I guess it's like definitely applicable to me, and I'm sure for a lot of other sports, but like if you go back and watch videos of yourself competing in your sport, like even just 2 years ago to where you are now, oftentimes it's night and day. And we don't give ourselves any credit for that.
Yeah.
Right? We don't look at like all the steps it took to get there. And that's kind of the biggest thing that I always try to stay focused on as an athlete is like, dude, even a 2-week period may feel like eternity. But you have to always take into account how much time you've put into your passion, into your sport, into whatever it is that you do. You know, there's going to be lows.
All of the progressions that you've made to get to the point where you're at.
Yeah, and so if you just return to that idea of consistency, right? I was still able to go out on that course at the Paralympics and ride so well that when I came back, my coaches were like, "We have no notes. Just keep doing what you're doing." Right? To be riding that well relative to like my past history, with all of those different circumstances, with all of that history leading up to that.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, I'm more proud of that than I am of any of my other medals.
And it's like, you know, because of all that work that you put in, even you on a low day was better than you on a great day 2 years prior, huh?
Yeah, and that's one thing I want to make extra clear, like for this podcast specifically, is it's easy to be a great athlete when everything is going your way. It's borderline impossible to be the athlete that you want to be when things are not. When you're injured, when you're having the worst day ever, those decisions and the progress that you make on those days is always going to be so much more important than any of the achievements you have on your best days. That's what makes you a great athlete. It's not the peaks, it's the valleys.
Yeah.
If you let those just suck you right down, you're going to take away from all of your potential.
Yeah.
If you stay focused on those for too long, right? But if you're able to accept that the valleys come and make the best of everything that you possibly can, and I know that's easy to say, right? It's so much easier said than done.
Yeah.
But if you can use reminders, whatever tools that work for you best to keep yourself grounded in those moments.
Yeah.
And keep yourself aware of the bigger picture of where you want to be, you know, once you come out of this injury or once you come out of whatever this, you know, this valley is. that's going to make you progress so much more as not just an athlete, but as a person, really, than anything else.
One thing I'd really like to key in on is you have a ton of experience with medical providers, not only with Beijing, but just growing up throughout your entire life. And one thing that I, keyed in when you were talking about this injury was how much of an advocate you were for yourself and your goals while you were getting your medical evaluation and you were going over treatment options. Because some people, they'll go into a medical office and they'll say, well, I mean, the doctor's going to tell me like what's going on and what we got to do about it. Whereas you were a great advocate for yourself and you said, what do we need to do to accomplish this goal? So what did you like about that provider? What made them a really good provider that enabled you to compete? And what is some advice that you have for athletes that are going through an injury that need to be advocates for themselves in the medical setting?
That is a fantastic question. And yeah, I definitely have a lot of experience in that. Even just, being 24 years old, being at my age, I've had 24 years of experience of being in the medical industry and talking to tons of different doctors, specialists, providers, you name it. I think the biggest thing to look for in your healthcare provider is someone who doesn't just listen to you, explain what your pain is like or, what you're going through, is to look for someone who will listen to your goals and give you options on how you want to get there. Because obviously doctors know more than us when it comes to, all of the medical history, medical treatment options, all of that, right? They have the knowledge. What you have is the goal and the vision. And you have to be able to find someone that can mix with that the way that you want it to, right? I've had plenty of different doctors tell me that I should not pursue a career in sports. Like that was a super common thing for me growing up is, hey, you know what? You're a really smart kid. Your SAT scores are good. Maybe let's just like focus on getting you into nursing or, engineering, or let's focus on that, right? I'm glad you like sports. Keep playing those, but maybe don't like put all your eggs in that basket. And there were plenty of interactions that I had with providers and with CP specialists too that were like, listen, you're talking about dedicating your life to a gravity-fed, momentum-based sport. You're a pencil, Why? Like, are you sure? Are you sure you want to do this? And with your physical stature too, because I'm a guy who on a good day is 130 pounds, soaking wet, right? Going up against Vikings that they've attached a snowboard to that weigh 230 pounds, right? And so like, did I make the best career choice? You could argue I didn't, right? There's definitely some flaws in that logic, right? Of deciding to do that. But it was the doctors that listened to me, that saw that passion in my eyes and were like, okay, you want to do this? I want to help you get there. Let's figure out the best way and come to an agreement on that, a mutual agreement.
Yes.
You're going to meet so many doctors who are going to tell you to slow down, stop, give up, just take it easy. Right? Because that's safe medical advice, right? There's nothing against those doctors. They are giving you what is probably the best medical recommendation for you and for your health. But it's another thing altogether to have a doctor that will be like, okay, this is what you want to do. Let's figure out how to get there. And I had that in the provider that gave me the epidural. Is absolutely, he could just be like, no, dude, I don't want to help you. The state you're in, you should not be competing. I'm not going to do it. Go home, take it easy, sit this one out. He totally had the right to say that, and I would have to go and find help elsewhere. But what made him so good and what makes me keep coming back to him is the fact that he listened and was like, okay, you want to compete, you're going to compete. Honestly, if I say no, you're probably just going to go to another provider and find out if they can help you, right? You're not just going to give up if I say no, right? So I know I'm in a good position to help you get there. Here's what we're going to do. We have a couple different options. We went over them. We went with the epidural, and it was a big success. And then when I came back, too, I saw him again because I was like, listen, I'm still in a lot of pain. And he was like, there's no way you're still in pain after what we did to you. Like, there's no way. And I was like, no, it still hurts, and especially around the right side. And he's like, that's different. Let's do some more MRIs. We did more MRIs and found out I had a bone spur in my pelvic joint. I had a hip impingement and a torn labrum. the entire time.
That'll do it.
Yeah.
I've got a torn labrum myself.
Yeah. And so
it's a good time.
It's a great time. Yeah. And so then from there, he was like, okay, this explains why you're still in pain. We're going to do, another local injection into your hip. This will take care of it. And since then, I've been doing a lot of physical therapy and focusing a lot on that area of my body to make sure that I can wait the longest amount of time before I have to go in for another injection. Because that was also the other thing he told me is like, listen, long term, you're going to have to figure something else out eventually, right? We can continue to do the injections, as a lot of people do, but you're also going to build up a tolerance to them. And you're also just going to keep damaging your body because we're not fixing anything. We're just treating the pain.
Yeah.
And so he was like, listen, I don't know how much longer you want to keep snowboarding, but that's something you'll have to think about, right? That's something you'll have to address. You'll have to face that reality of like your body is falling apart. That's what bodies do. You give them enough time, they fall apart.
Yeah.
And one of the common things that, we always say, and one of the biggest reasons why I'm in the gym is because we say it's not if, it's when. When you dedicate, your time to competing in any kind of, action sport, any kind of high contact sport, even just jogging, right? Eventually, your body is going to have some kind of error, some kind of thing that's going to go wrong.
You'll find the weak link in
You
the
will
machine.
find the weak link because it's there. I promise.
It's somewhere.
So why do you go to the gym? I don't go to the gym because I want to get super strong and I want to be able to bench press, 250 pounds or whatever. I go to the gym because I know that I have a certain amount of time that's undetermined until my body has a big issue again, and I'm going to have to treat it. So what can I do in the gym to where I can strengthen those parts of my body?
Yeah.
And so that way, when I do get injured again, not only is the injury less severe because that part of my body is stronger, but also I can bounce back a lot quicker because I already have a lot of strength and conditioning and support in that area.
Yeah.
And so for me, after I came back from Beijing and found out that like my body is falling apart at the age of 23, right? And I'm already due for a hip replacement and my labrum's torn and all of these problems that my, dad has at the age of 60. What can I do going forward? Right? To still be accountable for myself.
Yeah.
It's easy to just go to the doctor, have the doctor tell you what to do, you do that thing, and then you go home. But again, you will continue to go back to that doctor because you're only listening to him. You're asking him for advice, right? And so he's becoming kind of your go-to in a way, which to me is a little dangerous, right? You have to control your own destiny, and you have to be accountable for your physical status.
Yeah.
Obviously, you still need to go to the doctor when things are not going well. And the doctor is going to be able to do things for you that you can't do by yourself. But when you're at the doctor, ask questions. Ask as many questions as you can because they are going to know most of the answers that you're going to need to then take that care home and extend it as long as you can.
Yeah.
I know there's only a matter of time until I'm back in there for another injection, right? But I was supposed to get an injection 6 months ago, and I still feel great.
Yeah.
Why? It's because I asked him tons of questions. Okay, what are the best muscles I can strengthen? What do I need to be hitting in the gym? And so when I go to the gym, I'm not doing bench press. I'm not doing any of that kind of stuff. I'm doing core strengthening. I'm focusing on my transverse abdominis.
Yeah.
Man, that muscle has gotten so important to me lately. Look it up if you don't know what it is.
It's a good one.
Yeah, it's like pretty much the entire structure behind like your core. It's the thing that like cements your trunk in place so that when you go to pick up a box or squat down or stand up, you need to use that muscle to keep everything in line and just stacked, right? And so then I just asked him questions and I took that home with me. I then immediately reached out to my different physical therapists and I was like, listen, here's the paperwork I got from the doctor. Here's what he recommended. How do I go about this in the most efficient way possible? And that's one other thing that I do want to highlight quickly is it's difficult when you have an injury to look at the mountain of PT you have ahead of you and be able to just charge at it head on.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes the injuries that we have are not like small ones. They're like, okay, you're looking at 6 to 10 months of recovery.
Yep.
You know, you're going to have to be taking things slow. Here's the exercises you're going to have to do, 3 reps, 5 times a day. Like it can get very overwhelming, right? But when you reach out and you're like, hey, I want to do this in the most efficient way possible. If you can stress that, I found a lot of success in that.
That's a big thing. I coordinate care with a lot of providers, including physical therapists, and I do physical therapy and rehabilitation in my practice as well. And one thing that being an injured athlete, I went to a physical therapist when I was an injured runner. And I remember just getting exercise after exercise after exercise added on to my PT regimen.
Yeah.
And when I was in college, yeah, sure, I could do 3 hours of exercise
right.
a day. But now that I live
have a life and responsibilities, that's way too much.
So always be that advocate for yourself and say, okay, look, I can't do 3 hours of exercise a day because I would ask ask my PT at the time, what do I do with all these old exercises? And they're like, and the easy thing as a provider is, oh, you just keep doing this too.
Yeah.
You just run through those as well.
Keep that. We're gonna add these.
And at that time I was like, all right, yeah, I'm like dedicated. I'm done. But the thing is, like, when you have real life going on, you have other training that you have to do.
Yeah.
Like skill specific training. It's like, dude, I can't do 3-4 hours of exercise a day on top of all my other training, on top of if I got a job, on top of if I've got life, stuff like that. Personal life, that's a thing too, right?
Yeah, I guess.
So I love the way that you said, how can I do this efficiently? And I think oftentimes prioritizing what exercises you do also really bump up that compliance.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if we gave you 4 hours of stuff to do in a day, you might go, well, I don't really know which ones are the most important here. What's giving me the most bang for my buck? I don't know. So I'm going to just not do any of it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of easy to fall into that trap.
Yeah, it is.
But the biggest thing is, like we've talked about, is that consistency over time, aggregate of marginal gains.
Exactly.
That's such a huge thing. And one thing I also love about you, we would talk about some of the factors that you spoke about as an internal locus of control. So you talk to your providers, you talk to your doc, you talk to your PT. Okay, these are the factors that we need to change. How do we go about changing that? Let's make a game plan.
Yeah.
And your belief that you have control over that is associated with way better progression through injuries. So in the research, they call that internal locus of control, which is very much tied into self-efficacy, your ability to accomplish a task. And if you just tell people, it's people that are like cynical and like jaded and things like that, like, look, if you believe this is going to happen, it's more likely to happen. And they're just like, no, you live in like a fairyland,
Yeah.
But the research shows that
100%.
if people have the mindset that you have, they are likely to have improvement after, ACL recovery. They have lower symptoms, higher function, more likely to return to play, return to sport, all of those things. So like sometimes, I'm literally sitting in with a patient. I'm like, you get an attitude adjustment,
Yeah.
So I love that that's your framework and your mindset when you're recovering from these things. And you also are very purpose driven.
Yeah.
I got to get back on snow because guess what? There's another Olympics coming up. There are more world champs coming up, and I'm going to be there.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's absolutely what helps me have that mindset is just being able to feel like not only am I in control, right, by being able to talk to my doctors and coming up with a goal that I know I want and having them help me figure out how to get there. Yes. Not only do I kind of feel a little bit more in control of my own recovery, but also by asking to do it in the most efficient way possible, right? Also makes it to where there's small steps that are right in front of me that I know I can take right now, today. It makes recovery more actionable because absolutely it is easy to get stuck in that thing of like N+1, where N is the amount of, physical therapy things I have to do. And then they just keep adding to that constantly over the, whatever period it is to recover. It's another thing altogether to be like, listen, I want 5 exercises that take me at most 30 minutes to do. Give me 30 minutes where I can do my PT and then go to work. And if you kind of lay down those I almost kind of picture it like talking to like a significant other, right? When you're trying to like create boundaries for your relationship and you're trying to establish like the way that you communicate with them. It's the same way with your provider.
Yeah.
You have to ask for what you want, right? If you don't communicate that clearly, that person just has to guess on what you want that day, you know? And so if you sit down and you're like, I want 30 minutes of physical exercises I can do to help me, fix my shoulder before I go to work. Give me that. And they go, okay, all right, I have 30 minutes. Okay, well then this one's gonna be the best one to do right off the bat. So we'll do that. And then this one will be really supplemental to that. And then I noticed that this person also has a bit of, they need more structure on the back of their shoulders. So then we'll do that. Okay, there's your 5 exercises, right? That's your 30 minutes. You go, you do that for a week. Not only are you then more productive as a person because there's less of a mountain of tasks that you have to do before you can start your day, right? But then also you want to come back and be like, great, I've been doing that. I'm already feeling better. What do we do now? Okay, give me 5 more. And so you can just attack that so much faster and feel more confident the entire time. That way you don't get sucked into that mindset of like, this is taking forever. I hate this. This is too much physical therapy. Now I'm not going to do any of it. Yeah. It's so much better to do even 2 exercises that are going to help you, right? Even if that's all you can muster for that day, right? Because you have to juggle everything else because we have lives. If you can just start with something small like that, man, because then you can also just build the habit of that. Oh, hey, I'm knocking this out in 20 minutes. Give me 2 more exercises. Then like you're coming to your doctor and asking them for more rather than like having to report in, getting another, stack of papers with all the different exercises you have to do and then walking home dreading having to do these new ones, right? Then you're coming to them and you're like, I'm noticing differences. Give me more. You start to get so much more hungry, right? And that's what we're always like when we're injured is we just want to get back. So if you start small like that, you create a plan, you communicate that plan, you can execute it way faster than you think.
So being an advocate for yourself. Sometimes kind of forcing that provider to develop that relationship, the rapport, so that then you can trust them. Also associated with better outcomes in rehabilitation, surgeries, and procedures.
Exactly.
So that's such a huge key. Zach, this has been such a great conversation. We touched on so many different topics. What is one more piece of advice that you'd have for athletes, either coming back from an injury, that want to prevent injuries, et cetera? Because we do have to keep keying in on how do we prevent your next injury?
I think one thing that's definitely helped me a lot and helped me this season too. I had a really good season. I got 6 podiums out of the 8 events that I went to. I had 3 podiums at World Championships, and I got a 2nd World Championship title. And a big thing for me this year, coming off of the biggest injury I've ever had in my life, was that consistency, right? The aggregate gain, right? That is so key moving forward, whether you're coming back from an injury or just trying to prevent one. Because now, for me, the focus is preventing injury. I know that, my spine's already a little bit compromised. My hip's not in great condition. So I have less time than I probably think I do before I have to deal with those again, right? Or deal with a new problem. So that's definitely been like a new focus, a new priority for me. Is like, yes, I get it. I'm still in my, early 20s, but I do need to be careful. How can I do that? And so what I started doing is I started looking at some of the most common injuries in our sport. I started looking at some of the ways that people get crossed up on their snowboards and end up with torn ACLs and MCLs, and shoulder injuries are actually super common.
Most common injury in beginner snowboards is a wrist fracture.
Yeah, with a wrist fracture, because people aren't falling the correct way. They don't really know how to like hit the ground and move that energy in a way that can kind of be a little bit more gentle on your body. And so what I did was over last summer, I started focusing a lot on core strength, a lot on strengthening my shoulders, because I'm not going to my hands when I'm falling. I'm now taking that hit, across my body, across the side, or across
falling
my
with
back.
style.
Falling with style, right? But also making sure that I'm like kind of building my own bit of muscular armor, specifically for what I want to do, right? And so I've spent more time in the gym now talking to my personal trainer, which I'm lucky to have one for sure through the US team, but for those that might be listening that don't have access to something like that, just going online and doing research about the different kinds of exercises that you want to do to prevent the injuries you want to stay away from.
Yeah.
I'm okay with, a broken bone here or there because that just might happen, and there's not much you can do to stop a broken bone. But I can help strengthen my knees, I can help strengthen my hips, I can help strengthen my core.
Yeah.
So that way when I do fall, I can take care of the important bits of my body. Now my back is my biggest focus, right? So all I've been doing is a lot of core, a lot of back, lat pull downs, shoulder exercises, everything to strengthen my lower back, because I know that's going to be key for me moving forward. And now whenever I get out on my snowboard, I'm much more confident. I don't have to worry like I did last year about like, ooh, is this one turn going to make me throw my back out again? Right now I'm so much more confident because I'm like, without even thinking, I've built up the right habits to flex my transverse abdominis, to make sure I'm stacked and my core is locked and I can take this turn with confidence.
Yeah.
And now I can go back to that mindset that I was in before my injury of being able to risk a little bit and being able to go out and push myself. That's the biggest thing. So if anything, moving forward, take a big look at your regimen in the gym. Take a big step back and just look at the whole approach you have to your physical body, your physical status, and start thinking about it in terms of strengthening not just the biggest muscles that are going to move the biggest weights, but the smallest muscles that are going to reinforce the big ones. So that way, when you do take that next big hit, when you take that next big fall, whatever it might be, you're going to be so much more rock solid as a person that now I feel pretty confident that whatever my next injury is, it will be much smaller than the ones I've had in my past. Because again, it's not if, it's when. What do we do? What steps can we take right now to make it so that when that time comes, it's a minor inconvenience and we don't have to go through all that BS again of that whole return to play protocol.
I love this. And really building not only your physical resilience, but it sounds like you're really building a lot of your mental resilience as well, which after you have a really big injury like you sustained, a lot of times the people will develop these fear avoidance behaviors, and that can really keep them from getting back to action.
100%.
So it sounds like you really overcame that as well. Zach, this has been such a great conversation. Where can people follow your journey if they want to see badass photos of you border crossing and see what next stuff you're getting into?
Good question. I have an Instagram that I put a lot of effort into. It's The Mountain Miller, all one word. You'll see me there. I got a nice little headshot. But that's where I'm posting most of the stuff about me being an athlete. I've also started putting a little bit more content on TikTok, same handle. But ultimately what I want to have moving forward is people reaching out. So if there are any questions that come from this podcast and someone wants to, hear a little bit more about my story or want to hear a little bit more about maybe some of the intricacies of my injury and how I came back from it and the steps I took, reach out, send me a message.
Hit
me up.
The Mountain Miller.
I have so much time. So let me know, because that's what I want. I want to not just have a bunch of followers on my page, but I want to have a community that I can interact with, that I can share maybe any information that I might have that can help someone. And I want to take away a lot of just the questions that are constantly surrounded by it. If someone has questions about my disability, feel free to ask about that too. There's a lot of different ways that my growing up with my disability allowed me to learn lessons that still apply to people that are fully able-bodied, of just what I did to help strengthen my legs and make sure my pelvis wasn't offset. You would be surprised by how many people have a pelvis that tilts one way or another and how much that affects the rest of your body, and just small things in the gym can fix that.
Definitely.
So anytime, reach out.
All right, well, everybody reach out, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the coffee.
Great. Yeah, of course. Cheers, yeah?
Cheers.
Yeah. This program is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Always consult with your physician before starting any exercises or doing anything contained in this program. Always stop if you experience any pain, discomfort, or difficulties performing anything described in this program.